Hi there, welcome back. This is Beth Godbee on Career Discernment, what, why, and how. And this presentation asks and begins to answer the question, what is career discernment? To get started, I want to suggest that you take a few minutes to do free writing about the word career discernment, beginning with career, and just writing about all of your past associations with this word. What comes to mind, what early memories, maybe the first time you've heard the word career, negative or positive associations with the term, even just connotations that this word has picked up over time, how you've heard it used in your program. So kind of doing some word mapping around career. Do the same with discernment, thinking about what does the word call to mind for you, what are the connotations, the history of the word, any past associations. And then if you can put these two words together for career and discernment, begin to think about what this term means to you. Hopefully you'll press pause on the video and spend a little time with this work and then come back in. And I want to start there with your understandings of career discernment because I think it's important to bridge our past understandings to new understandings of terms and our personal understandings to how we might collectively use a term. So really bringing all of that history in, one question is to think about what do you want career discernment to mean and to look like in your life, and how might you even shift that definition. I'll present some of how I approach career discernment and how I've come to understand the term, but it really is an open question for you to hold on to about how do you also understand and relate to this concept of career discernment. So I understand career discernment as something that's ongoing, lifelong, something that happens throughout the lifespan, not just early in career, a process that is reflective and involves contemplative work, the discernment piece, that's fundamentally about decision making of one's life work, that understanding of career. Certainly there can be a lot of different exploratory questions and information seeking pieces to this process. And it can involve working with a career counselor, advisor, with lots of other people. It can involve lots of internal looking, embodied, emotional kind of practices. It can involve trying things out and stepping back and reflecting, how did that go? Looking backward, forward in time. It can be very expansive. And there's probably an umbrella, that sense of umbrella around career discernment, in which there's a lot of work happening. But I think just to ground it in a very simple definition, I would say career discernment, though it involves all sorts of reflective decision making, fundamentally means or involves looking at ourselves, our place in the world, and the work we're called to do. Therefore, it also involves asking those rhetorical questions I shared in the introductory video about why are we called to this work, with whom, for whom, where, when, how, those hovering questions, the big questions that would define work and our place in work. It also means slowing down enough to inquire about what's taken for granted and what we imagine our life's work could be, looking backward into how we've been shaped and how we've come to this moment, and then looking forward into the possibilities of what our life's work may be. And that can be looking forward a few months, a few years, over a lifespan. So engaging in short-term planning, long-term planning, slowing down to be in the moment, thinking long-term. There's a lot of both and energy of the both, looking at the big questions and getting into the details. Fundamentally, career discernment is a question of commitments. What are we committed to? Or the question is, how do our commitments motivate the work that we're called to do? And therefore, an orientation to career discernment can involve looking at the priorities in our lives, what is absolutely non-negotiable, what's especially urgent for ourselves personally and collectively, our sense of relational responsibilities, to whom we're responsible, how do we hold ourselves accountable, a sense of how we act on values through dedications, through living out a purpose. It also can involve questions like what fires us up and brings us energy and what drains our energy, and holding those kind of contradictions in our mind's eye so that we're able to step back and think through how can our work fuel our life and tap into life purpose. In that way, career discernment is about what is the work we're called to do at this time, where we're situated with what's possible, and breaking possibilities, creating possibilities. And fundamentally, I know that's a lot of big and tough questions. And they're also the ones that are the most important, the most worth asking, really going right into questions of what matters, what's purposeful in our lives. What I want to do now is tell two stories of career discernment, two people I've worked with to give a sense of what might this look like, a bit of texture around career discernment. So I'm going to read aloud two cases. If you'll just kind of listen with me and think through any themes that come up, and then use those to talk a little bit more about what does this look like? What is career discernment? So the first story is a mid-career professional in higher education and a faculty member. So a faculty member well into their career, tenured, in an important administrative role, known in their discipline and their local community, contacted me seeking support in considering the next career chapter. By so many measures, they were making it in their career and had options available: routes to more publications, administrative work, curriculum development, community-based scholarship. But they were also feeling burned out, and like any of the routes they considered, might involve more of the same pressure, more of the same overwork, that they might continue overextending themselves without a clear sense of purpose. So our work together involved reaching toward clarity about where they felt inspired or fueled in their career, and in contrast, where they were losing that energy and burning out. The core question wasn't whether to leave higher education, but it was what is their next career stage? What's next for their career? With many possible directions for making contributions and putting energy, where were they called to take action? And why there? Why being the key question. How do you build a career that could provide fuel for the long term to avoid ongoing burnout and instead inspire the next and next and next career stage or chapter? That's the first story or case. Here's a second one, someone early career in graduate school. So a current graduate student and a former undergrad in writing studies contacted me for a recommendation to law school. Throughout college, she was committed to social and racial justice and involved in a lot of direct action campaigns on and off campus. Her first job was with a rape crisis center, where she used psychology and writing majors in multiple communication roles. That position highlighted injustice, sharpening her analysis of how oppression plays out both structurally and personally. Out of frustration and a desire to learn more about policy work, she began volunteering as a victim advocate and spending time in courtrooms. From there, she met attorneys who encouraged her to pursue law school, but not necessarily to practice law. Instead, she wanted to learn more about the legal arena and what's needed to navigate policy changes. She's currently in the midst of legal studies and interning at a law office, with the hope that she'll eventually be in a legislative position after graduation. But she's telling me that the more she studies, the more she wonders if she's really being asked to write about these failing systems. She's open to what's next, both preparing and allowing for that emergence to happen. She's already experienced several career changes, and she expects to move again, not to settle into one job, but to use each toward clarifying the work that she's called to do. So what do these two cases or these two stories tell us about career discernment? I hope some themes become clear. The first, thinking about time, I wanted to choose two that would contrast the time of life in which this activity, career discernment, is happening, because truly career discernment is ongoing and lifelong. I think sometimes in higher ed we have an idea that you figure things out early and you get in a career path and you stay there, but rarely is that the way that our lives work. And even when we choose to stay in a single position, there's so many choices about which projects to take, where to put our energies, which chapters to lean into. Do we do more teaching, more service, more community-based work, more publication work, administrative work? There's a lot of routes. So thinking about time, it's also about the time to slow down and to listen more carefully to what our bodies are telling us. This can be listening to burnout, listening to a sense of what's not working, and in the present moment, thinking about what are we being led, how are we being led to the present moment, and what are we being led toward. So having that sense of things as being ongoing and a process. The second theme is a sense of emergence, that though we can plan quite a bit and make active decisions, there's also a bit of just letting things unfold and noticing patterns. So the process often is emergent and it's often messy. I hope you can hear in these stories that there's there can be a sense of expectation, unmet or unfulfilled expectations, disappointment, loss, changing directions and circuitous pathways. Each route we try, I think, invites us to come back and reflect on those earlier steps that we've taken and what's worked for us and hasn't and why. So with each moment in our careers, we can get better at fine-tuning or helping to tune our internal navigation systems. Those navigation systems like embodied knowledge, listening internally to the intuition that's driving us, getting more clarity on our commitments, and using our internal guidance systems to make further and future career decisions. The third is commitments. In both of these cases, there's a sense of commitment or purposeful decision making, whether that commitment is to higher education, whether it's to having a job that's going to be explicitly anti-oppression and for social and racial justice. Commitments are important for directing the why. Why are we doing this work? Why is this what's next? As opposed to being on autopilot or just following into this is the next position that was there. So I think it's about connecting the personal why also with a sense of collective why, of what's needed, what's urgent for us collectively, and how do we as individuals fit into that. And the process, therefore, is likely to change us as individuals. I'll just read this. It's likely to change us, and therefore to change how we relate with the world, with others, with our studies, with the work we're called to do, with our sense of self. It can really upturn a sense of what we thought was there in all the best possible ways. So I hope these stories begin to illustrate that there's a lot of complexity to career discernment, that it is asking those big questions. It is about decision making, but not just one decision, but many decisions. The everyday small decisions and the big decisions about what's our life's work, and about coming back to those questions again and again. In the next video, we're going to talk about why does this matter? Why? What are some principles that might guide career discernment as a process? But before we get there, I want to suggest 2 activities to kind of dig in further to what is career discernment. The first is to create a timeline of your career trajectory to this point. You might actually write out like a timeline, a line, and be able to map what were key points, past career decisions, relationships, ups and downs of moments that have really helped to inspire you or drain your energy. How did you get to where you are in your graduate program? If you can visualize it, you can start to tell stories about it, and also to do some of that reflective work to think about not just the decisions that were made, but why were they made, and actually spend some time looking backward in order to be able to look forward. The second exercise is to begin to think about what matters to you toward getting into this question of commitments. And in the next video, we'll talk about commitment statements and how commitments guide this career discernment process. So here are some questions that you might just, again, brainstorm, free write to. What feels especially urgent? What's intolerable, or what can you not compromise on? What work do you feel called to do? And what work have you done in the past that you know that you can't do? That's a not to do any longer. All of this kind of hovers around questions about key life priorities, purposes, a sense of what matters most. You could even just write to the question of what matters to me most now. What do I imagine will matter most in the future? And hopefully this is kind of some back burners, some in the background writing that will fuel the commitment statement that we'll pick up on in the next video. So some ways to get started and some initial definitional work on career discernment. Thanks for sticking with these videos and for, again, investing in this work on career discernment. Again, I'm Beth Godbee, and you can find me at Heart, Head, Hands Every Day Living for Justice if you'd like to reach out with questions, feedback. And I hope that this work can continue to fuel your work with Gear Plus and in the individual development plan, which again is about a lot of discernment practices and the slowing down and thinking about the why. Why do we do the work we do? Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.